Hi guys, Mariah from the Entourage team here, and welcome to this episode of the Make It Happen show. Sales is the lifeblood of every business, because if you're not making sales, then you're not making money and you're not growing. No matter what you're in the business of selling, every business owner needs to develop and refine their selling skills, because you need to be able to sell your vision, your idea, and of course, your product or service. To help you make it happen, we've called upon Peter Lakovich, Australia's leading sales trainer, to share 22 strategies to help you start generating more sales in our newest short course. Peter has over 25 years of experience helping small business owners create impactful sales strategies. He's also worked with the likes of Mazda, ING, Channel 9 and Westpac. In fact, his sales techniques have generated over $2 billion for Australian businesses. But as one of our loyal podcast listeners, you can access the whole course for just $19. If you're ready to grow, head to www.the-entourage.com/increase-sales to get lifetime access to this short course today. Now, I'll hand you over to Tim and our guest. It's time for the Make It Happen show.
A lot of people will, go and do a business degree because I want to start a business right now. Well, the best way to actually learn how to start a business is to genuinely throw yourself in the deep end. Don't be dumb, but at the same time too, just do it. If someone who's 15 could look at me and go, hang on a second, I can actually at 17 go out and raise money from professional investors to start a business, which, has the potential to change the way the world looks at e-commerce and the way that e-commerce itself is managed. Happy days. It's shocking to kind of people who actually do this type of fraud, because it is not the international princes who are, buying credit card numbers online and trying to give you $11 million from their auntie's inheritance, but they need your passport number in return. It's not those types of guys. It is literally just people who are trying to get stuff for free.
Hi everyone, welcome to this episode of the Make It Happen show. I'm Tim Morris, the CEO of The Entourage, and today I'm joined by Jack Bloomfield, the founder and CEO of Disputify. Now, Jack is a super impressive young entrepreneur. He started his first business when he was really young. He's had multiple businesses since then. But really today what we do is we dive into Disputify and the problem he's trying to solve in the e-commerce industry. It's very interesting and very relevant to anyone who's selling products online. So we talk about how he started Disputify, how Jack raised money just a few short months after finishing school, and where the business is at today. And one of the things I loved about this conversation was Jack, while he is still a very young entrepreneur, he's super wise about business. He's really learned how to look at business and grow a business in a really interesting way. So there's a lot here for every entrepreneur, I think. Entrepreneurs who are young, entrepreneurs who are already into business, people who are looking to start now, or just looking to take the next step. So let's get into it. Jack Bloomfield, welcome on the show. How are you doing?
Mate, well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
All right, so your business, Disputify, you are on a mission to rid the world of refund fraud. So 2 questions on this. First of all, what is refund fraud? And second of all, how are you making that happen?
Yeah, cool. So refund fraud. Refund fraud is a problem that many merchants know of, but not many actually understand they have. Essentially, it's when they have a customer who looks perfectly legitimate, come to their store, buy a product, all the typical fraud tools they might have installed, like Stripe Radar or 3D Secure, and there's hundreds of them, will tick the transaction as approved because the customer uses their own information. What they'll then do is when the customer receives the products, the merchant dispatches it, and the product's sitting in that customer's living room, customer then turns around and either goes straight back to the merchant or goes to the bank and says, hey, my product never arrived. Or, hey, I ordered 2 shoes and only one was in the box. And if the merchant gets that sort of customer request, most often than not, we'll just give a refund, considering they just will blame it on their warehouse team or they'll blame it on whoever, the courier. It doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the customer's always right. So we know that a lot of merchants just look at refunds as a standard line item, or 11% of our goods were returned. But not a lot of merchants actually start to dig in and go, well, hang on a second, this customer might have done this 2 or 3 times in the last 3 months, and there is no way of keeping track of any of that. So kind of how we do it and how we solve the problem for merchants is we're a direct integration. So we sit post-transaction, if they're on Shopify, Neato, WooCommerce, whatever, we'll sit there, we'll post-transaction scan everything. So after all the fraud tools have done all their analysis, We'll do our analysis. We'll pick that transaction apart. And if that customer has a history of doing this sort of dodgy behavior, we'll flag that order, put it instantly on hold for the merchant. And the merchant has a second chance to review it through a notification we send before they ship the product out. So essentially giving them a heads up, giving them a chance to actually know what type of customer they're dealing with, as opposed to just blindly sending orders out to people they have absolutely no clue what they're like, and then just getting these ridiculous refund requests when this guy's most probably than not done it 5 times in the last month.
Gotcha. So the difference between what traditionally has been available is that they're scanning for like fake accounts, right? And they're probably easier to find.
Like credit cards, like Nigerian prince has bought a bunch of credit cards. He's trying to give me $11 million to my spam email. Those sort of guys using credit cards to buy stuff, of which aren't theirs. But this whole new wave of fraud is just something that not a lot of merchants understand, because these are just legitimate people just wanting stuff for free. And I mean, who doesn't want a PS5 for free? Who doesn't want a new fishing set for free? Like, if you can get something for free, happy days. And especially when, you're just dealing with faceless e-commerce merchants, and just dealing with a customer support agent, like, it's a pretty easy sell as long as you know what you're doing.
So yeah, that's really interesting. Is it people that just try it once and then realize it's really easy to do, and so they do it again and again? Or how do people get into this kind of nefarious lifestyle?
Oh, mate, it's shocking the kind of people who actually do this type of fraud, because it is not the international princes who are, buying credit card numbers online and trying to give you $11 million from their auntie's inheritance, but they need your passport number in return. It's not those types of guys. It is literally just people who are trying to get stuff for free. And you look at it, I mean, if you can get a PS5 for free, you can get a pair of shoes for free. We find that automotive parts as well are a huge industry for this type of fraud, because, I can buy a light bar for my four-wheel drive for the weekend, go four-wheel driving, and then just return the thing once I'm done with it. Like, It is ridiculous. So we originally came across this type of fraud because actually our marketing girl was on Reddit. And on Reddit, there are hundreds of forums of thousands of Australians who are literally talking about this type of fraud. So how have they committed it? What were the type of tactics they used? So did they use that the product never arrived, or that it was partially delivered? Like, what works best for each merchant? Which merchants are easier to attack? Like, even like, what is the upper threshold limit that you can spend before customer support starts to get starts to raise question marks? So this stuff is so well defined, so well choreographed, it's coordinated. And when people just get a hold of merchants they think are easy to go after, it is not a nice picture for a merchant to have to deal with.
So as an SME, right, how would I at least see the flag that this might be a problem I need to start paying attention to? What should I be looking at to then say, okay, let's dig deeper into this?
Well, that's the hardest part, because you can't actually, these people use their own information. And even if they use a different first name, they might still use their address. So from a merchant, it is incredibly difficult, because if you haven't seen a past pattern of behavior, so you haven't had a direct match every single time. So if John becomes Johnny to Shopify, for example, it's going to be a separate order with a separate order number and all that. So even if he's had 3 refunds in the past, it's not going to correlate to the new order that's just come through. So, I mean, solutions like ours, and we haven't seen anyone who's looking at refund fraud specifically, we sit there and we track and tag these guys. So even if they obfuscate their name, their email address, like their IP address, we will still realize that it's them. We just put the order on hold and give the merchant a second chance, because we know that if you're a merchant, you get an order and you understand that, hey, this person's most probably just going to try and take advantage of you. You can put a bunch of different steps in place and just double check before you send the good out. And it might save you a couple $100 a pop.
Yeah. Well, it's super important. Did you say before that a lot of merchants will say they just have an expense line item that says 11% of our sales will be returns?
We've seen 11%. Australia is sitting around that. US is even higher. It is obscene, ridiculous, and especially during COVID as well, when you've got so much gray area around people not wanting to go return things in store, people buying things they just can't afford anymore, and just returning them for the sake of returning them. Returns have and return policies for a lot of merchants. Like Big W has a 90-day change your mind policy. So you could go buy something, use it for 90 days, and then just say I didn't like it. If you just put it back in the box and say you never opened it. It's ridiculous and it's nuts. And people aren't dumb. People catch on to this sort of stuff. And hey, if you can use something for 90 days and just return it and just buy another one and use that for 90 days, and then, I use a dress for a wedding and I no longer need the dress anymore. People are going to take advantage of that, and it's horrible.
Yeah. Well, I suppose these really generous returns policies started from when we were first really getting onto e-commerce, right? I think it didn't. ASOS started with like a 365-day return policy, or even an unlimited one, and then had to very quickly start bringing it down because I think in the early days you had to have that very generous return policy online for people to be comfortable with it.
Well, no, mate, I get it because it's hard because like a lot of merchants, like there are customers who look at return policies and hey, if a return policy is super lax and like it is a peace of mind for a lot of customers, but there are other customers as well who look at that from a completely different lens and go, hey, ASOS is giving away a lifetime, free guaranteed return. I'm more than happy just buy something and then 3 years time decide that I've got bored of it and just go and take it back. Like people admire it, people respect it, people like it, and people will buy from retailers with great return policies. But on the other flip side, people are also going to take advantage of it.
Yeah. So Disputify sits post or pre-purchase, but after all those normal fraud checks, right? So we know it's not a Nigerian prince that's doing this at a worldwide scale. So past that tick box. Now it's like, okay, wait a minute. Let's have a look and see whether this person's got a pattern or a history of fraudulent returns. And then we'll give you a bunch of flags to say, check this person out further. I mean, what would the merchant then do? Would they try and contact them, or what's the process?
Yeah, so we've found that a lot of merchants actually have some sort of fraud process in place. So if one of the other fraud tools that they've got installed, which is looking for that genuine credit card fraud, picks something up, most merchants have some sort of policy that they, enact. So that might be, as you rightly said, just pick up the phone, call the guy, see if he's actually legit. Or it might be, let's take a photo of the box before we send it out, or let's weigh the box, or let's pay a couple of extra dollars, get some tracking on the package, and at least when he turns around and says, oh, it never arrived, there is some sort of recourse that you've got. It's not going to be the silver bullet if you still choose to send the product out, but at least there's some things that you can do apart from just saying, I don't want to deal with this customer at all. You've got the right to refuse a sale as a merchant and just refund the customer and move on. So really it's 100% up to you. And that's why we're very deliberate that we're not going to be automatically declining transactions for merchants. We're not going to, purely because we just want merchants to have the information there so they can actually do business online properly, as opposed to just kind of making sales people they don't really understand and just crossing their fingers and hoping nothing bad ends up happening.
Yeah, really interesting. How did you get into this space? Like, I think it's a very interesting space. Every business does need to start getting down to the detail of this kind of area because it's where the margin is made. But obviously, to build a business in this area, what was the first foray into it for you?
So I started pretty young, at 12, right? Grand old age of 12. Really, what did I do back then? It was gift cards. So I used to buy and sell gift cards online. So I would buy gift cards from just normal news agencies, write in them, and then have some sort of gift card service there where I'd tag it with a greeting card. So I built the website for all of that. That was the first ever thing that I did, and then very quickly moved into e-commerce. So was 15, 16, I had $500 to my name. I found actually on YouTube, there was this guy who was like 21, who was making all this money. I'm sitting there going, well, crap, I'm in high school, I think just in high school at that point. Why can't I do something similar? So it was after school, weekends, any time that I could possibly get, just sitting here and consuming all this information. So how do you start a Shopify store? How do you run a Facebook ad? All the simple stuff, which at the time seemed incredibly difficult to do. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it took me 6 months to make a sale. And I think it was a carbon fiber money clip I originally sold for $30. And, I thought it was Bill Gates when I sold it. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. And just went from there, and things grew really, really, really quickly. But at the same time too, with, an increasing top line, you've also got bottom line to worry about as well. And we started to look into a lot of the returns that we were giving out, chargebacks specifically. We started to identify that there were people who were coming back multiple times, and you'd get someone who would buy a product from us, turn around and say it wasn't as described. Okay, fair enough, if that's what they think. Then they come back and buy the product 2 or 3 more times. The exact same product they claim it wasn't described in the first place. They go, why would someone do that? And then you join the dots together and you go, oh, actually, it's just because this guy wants 2, 3, 4 of this product for free, and they know they can get away with it. And Disputify, I went out and raised money for early 2020, and all with the premise and the understanding that people, when they wanted to get a product for free from a merchant, would go straight to a bank and lodge a chargeback. Now, that is true, and there are a lot of merchants that suffer from chargebacks, and that's what we originally built the business on. Soon as we then realized, and as we started to integrate with merchants directly, so with Shopify and WooCommerce and Magento and Neato, We then realized that there were more customers, instead of just going to the bank and lodging chargebacks, who were just easily going straight back to the merchant, because going to the bank as a customer is pretty scary. Going straight back to a faceless customer support agent and just whatever excuse you've currently got, and just getting a refund through that way is actually a much easier thing to do. So as soon as we figured that out, that's where the whole refund fraud prevention came in, and also realized that no one else is looking at this area of the market, and especially from the way that we're looking at it from.
Yeah, interesting discovery there, because even chargebacks is a pretty big thing, and it's very, very, I think it's very pro-consumer. Like really the onus is on you as a business to then prove that you've delivered the product or the service, and you've got to do it in a pretty short time frame as well. So that's a big thing. I know that's a thing. It's a thing in every business. We have it in our business. But then to discover that actually it's an even bigger problem, not even going to the banks, is a pretty interesting discovery. And so do most businesses, do bigger businesses just have a threshold that they say, if it's under this amount, just refund?
Yeah. And people, as I mentioned before, have identified that, unfortunately, and that's mostly what gets exploited. And you have a lot of SMEs who go, well, this isn't a problem that happens for me. But as soon as we then start to ask, hey, have you ever had a customer who's turned around and said the box never arrived? And they think about it and they go, oh, actually, yeah, we get like one or two of those a month. And then they look at, well, okay, how much is an average order? Well, 150, well, average cart size, 150, $200. Hang on a second, you're losing what, $400, $500, $600, $700, and in some cases even more, to just giving these refunds out because you can't be bothered to deal with it and you've got no process to stop it. And as soon as merchants then start to realize, oh, actually, yeah, that is what we're doing, we need to change that. Unfortunately, so many businesses write this off as a cost of doing business. And if you've got something there you're spending money on, which you don't need to spend money on, and you're still writing it off as a cost of doing business, yeah, it's not the best way to go, and it's not exactly business 101.
Yeah, well, and that you touched on it before. It's like as you're growing, you're really worrying about top line. Early stage, it's always top line, but then once you get to a reasonable size, bottom line is just important, because you need to have money left over at the end to either reinvest and pay all your bills. Yeah, exactly. And it is when you're down in the bottom line space, when you're down looking at cost of sales, you can always tie. It's like we're going to invest heavily in cost of sales because it drives the top line. But then all your operational costs under that, like percentages, make a huge difference. Like a business that's doing a 10% profit margin is okay. 20% profit margin is starting to get decent, right down the bottom. And so, you find 10 of these line items, you save 1% or 2 there, like that's doubling your profit potentially. And this could be an area that is at least shaving off a 1% profit margin. So I understand why it's important. So let's talk about that journey a little bit more about, so from 12 to how old are you now?
Just turned 19 as of
19.
Friday last week.
Oh, congratulations.
Getting old, aren't I? Yeah.
Well, I won't tell you what my birthday is. It's happening next Saturday. It's definitely not 20. So in 7 years, you've gone from, a couple of early stage businesses, gift cards, into e-commerce. The e-commerce business you started when you were still at high school. And so you started with that money clip. What else were you selling in the e-commerce business?
I mean, at the peak, I think I had 13 stores live. I had one at one time. It was really anything that we could find in China, of which was pretty cheap, nothing under $30 that it cost us to buy. And if we could sell it for $50 to $80, and resell it all through Facebook, so just run Facebook ads, not so many Google, just more so Facebook. And then if the margin was great, which most often not it was pretty good. So I spent a lot of my time trawling Facebook, looking for products that were trending. So we'd find ads that were doing really well. What products are they? Where are they buying from? What are they selling them for? And we'd go in there and we'd try and essentially undercut that competitor. And we'd do that with a lot of different products. So it's essentially just, all right, we've got 100 products. Let's run Facebook ads against the 100 products, see which products actually end up working over the space of a 2-week period, 1 to 2 weeks. And then we'll start to double down and spend a bit more money behind the ad spend and go from there.
And are you still running any of those shops, or are you now fully focused in the new area?
No, so fully focused in the new area. It was certainly an option. So when I originally raised the money for Disputify, I was literally, so I'd finished school end of 2019, had the idea for Disputify on Dad's 50th birthday cruise. We did a little cruise around Vanuatu and spent the entire time cooped up in a coffee shop, figuring out, hang on a second, this is a problem we've had for over a year. I'd spoken to someone and he said, well, why don't you start doing something about it? And I said, actually, that's a great idea. And then so also that's the problem. How the hell do I go ahead and actually solve it? and spent about 4 days in a coffee shop and walked out of the cruise with an entire business plan and action steps, what I was going to do to make it a reality. So it was a bit of a journey, and that was literally a month or two after I finished school. So literally first year out of school, went out and raised money for Disputify, and at that point made the decision, well, either I'd like to think I can do two things at once. Any at the time 17-year-old thinks they can as well, but I think it's probably smarter to focus on one, make that a success, and then we can move on and do other things.
Yeah, and the whole drop shipping area has gotten more and more competitive. I mean, Facebook, we do a lot of advertising on Facebook, and it's just getting more and more and more expensive and more competitive, particularly over the last year or two. And so, I can see it would have been a harder game to keep playing as well. So I'd love to dig into the capital raising process, right? So you've got this idea of Disputify, you've got a business plan on, it sounds like it was more than on a napkin, but it's still sort of conceptual stage. How did you go about getting the interest of investors? What was the capital raising process like for you as a young entrepreneur? Love to hear the story.
Yeah, cool. So, so a bit more than a napkin. It was a Google Docs document, if I can give myself any sort of credit. And that was, we'll put it on more of a timeline so it makes sense. So that would have been December of 2019. Finished the cruise, came back, and part of that action step was, first of all, trying to figure out whether this idea I had to solve the problem was actually something that was valid. One of the greatest criticisms I've got, and of myself as well, is that, anyone likes to think their ideas are great, and no one likes to go out there and actually try and prove them. So for me, it was going, all right, I might think this is awesome. I think this is a silver bullet to the problem, but let's go out and actually have a chat to a few people who I might know through my network and see if this actually might have legs. One of the first people I ever spoke to was a guy named Nigel Watts. Nigel actually happens to be on the board of Disputify now. And at the time, Nigel was doing some work for MasterCard. So I'd looked at MasterCard on LinkedIn. Nigel had come up. I'd heard of him a couple of months before, hence the LinkedIn connection. And I messaged him and I said, mate, this is something, I know you don't know me, but this is an idea that I've got. I see that you've got some sort of affiliation with MasterCard. Would you mind having a chat and seeing if this is potentially, a problem that you've heard of before, and whether the solution I've got might have legs? Anyway, messaged me straight back. I was flabbergasted. I was like, oh shit, actually wants to have a chat. He was overseas at the time and made some time. He made time for me to have a chat with him. And essentially goes, I think this is something that, could go somewhere. Had a few other conversations with other people, and then went, all right, I think I'm onto something. The next thing was more so figuring out, well, how much money do I actually need to raise? My biggest problem at the time was I didn't know how much I actually needed. I find that a lot of people underestimate how much they need to actually, take an idea off the ground. And there are, many circumstances where you might think one thing might take 2 months, but actually it might take 12 months, or 3 months turns into 2 years. Like, everyone always underestimates everything, especially in startup land. So I was very lucky to actually pick a figure that I knew was reasonable to raise, pick a timeline that I also knew was reasonable to make things an actual reality, and go from there. So that was probably one of the biggest challenges, because I didn't know. It was going out and getting quotes from people, figuring out, well, who the hell's going to build this for me? Because I'm not technical. I don't know how to code. And what is a team going to look like? Who do I put in a team? What do the roles look like? I've run a business before and I've done quite well at it, but I've never built a team. But we're at 7 now. Never built a team before, which actually comprises of people and people management and all the other fun stuff that goes with running a business. So went from there, went out, started speaking to investors. We had a mix of a couple of different investors, most of whom came from family offices, and who I'd met a couple of months before and throughout the last year, and had a conversation with them, had an investor meeting, sat down, did a pitch. This is the idea that I've got. It so happened that actually one of the people who was in that meeting stood up and said, well, I actually run an e-commerce store, and this is one of the biggest problems that I've got. I hate it. I didn't know what you were here to talk to us about today, but now that you've said it, now I actually understand what you're doing, and I understand why, this is something that would seriously help me. And I'm sitting there going, right, okay, well, fantastic. So that was pretty much sealed the deal. And then from there, had the money. And the next question then comes, well, what the hell do I do with it? So luckily by that point, Nigel and then another guy by the name of Jason Titman, who's the other board member, also joined the board. And Jason at the time was heavily affiliated with Neato, which is one of the platforms we're integrated with. So they, for me, were certainly a guiding light to figure out, well, how do we best deploy the resources? We've got this money here, but where is it best spent? And making sure that I was focusing on the right things as opposed to getting sidetracked when, there's 100 different things you can possibly be doing, actually picking the right ones to run down and go from there.
Yeah, awesome. The thing I love about that is it's probably I think it's getting more and more rare to hear people successfully raising money at the real concept stage. Because there is a lot more focus on have you got your proof of concept? Have you done your MVP? Have you got V1 of your product out there? And so it's really impressive that you went and did that at the early stage. And the takeaway that I took from that is that really, because you're at concept stage, you put the focus on getting in front of the right people. And you only get lucky with getting in front of a lot of people, but it sounds like you had that one, one guy's like, I have this problem. It's like, great, right person. Another guy's like, oh, I'm from Nito, we can see this. So maybe that's a lesson from that. If you're early stage, concept stage, looking to raise money, it's about getting out, pressing the flesh, getting in front of the right people, obviously inspiring them with your vision, and then away you go. Is it public how much you raised? You happy to share that?
It's not public at the moment. I have not even made the decision. It's not. I don't think it's that hard to find. And there are people in Australia, which is fantastic, who sit there and they look at young guys, especially I was 17 at the time, so I couldn't even put the legal assets in my name. It had to be under mums in a trust. It's just ridiculous. And you have people who look at that and don't see that as an obstacle, don't see that as a barrier, and actually go, well, hang on a second. If this kid's got the guts to actually know what he's talking about, stand up, give a pitch, it doesn't sound like he's just talking out of his ass, and actually has a clear plan, has something, knows exactly what he wants to build, knows exactly how he wants to build it, knows exactly how he's going to go about doing it, and have all the pieces of the pie lined up. It's sit there and people are actually willing to take a punt on that sort of stuff. And I am incredibly lucky, and it certainly a day does not go past. And, when I say this, it just sounds like, play the humble card, but it is, we are very lucky in Australia that we do have people. And there are a lot of investors who look down at young people, look down at people who might not have run a startup before and say, hey, regardless if you're 30, 25, 18, 17, whatever, you got a great idea and you know how you're going to go out and execute on it. We'll give you the capital, we'll give you the resources to go and do it.
That's great to hear, because actually oftentimes you hear that we're a little bit reserved and hesitant, particularly in the VC landscape here in Australia, to hear you were well received and you got investment at a young age. I think it's a big plus actually, because oftentimes, particularly professional investors, family offices, they bet on entrepreneurs, not necessarily the idea or the first idea or the second idea, but they bet on people that they think will actually eventually have some success. And the great advantage of being 17 is and you weren't even first time out of the gates at 17. This is third venture now. The chances are of even if this one doesn't quite work out, you've got many more swings in you. Maybe, if you're an older business person, 50, 60, and this is your first real venture, then you've got to instill a little bit more confidence, because you're not going to have too many more swings after that. So it's interesting to see it as a plus, like it was for you. It's pretty inspiring. Other young entrepreneurs, do you have much to do with other young entrepreneurs? Do you know, is there a community of people about your age that are leading businesses?
Look, honestly, I wish I could say yes. There should be. The short answer is no, not that I know of. I'm sure that I know of it if it did exist. There aren't too many people who are going out and building businesses. And I don't mean to say that there isn't able to be people who are in a similar position to me at such a young age. I think it's more so an area of issue that, the more I look at what I do and how I talk about what I do and getting out there as more of a case of, well, hang on a second, if someone who's 15 can look at me and go, hang on a second, I can actually at 17 go out and raise money from professional investors to start a business, which, has the potential to change the way the world looks at e-commerce and the way that e-commerce itself is managed. Happy days. And I think that there hasn't really been that many examples of that, especially in Australia, not that I've ever seen. And I don't want to be the first. I hate the fact that I think I am the first to do something like this. And I think that hopefully by being the first, I can change the fact that there should be hundreds, and there has the potential to be hundreds. And hopefully that's something over the next couple of years, next decade, next 2 decades, that if I can play a role in changing, happy days.
Hi guys, Mariah from the Entourage team here again. Just wanted to jump on and make sure you're going to get your hands on the 22 Sales Strategy short course with Peter Lakovich today. It's not every day that you get to access the high growth sales strategies that have generated over $2 billion for Australian businesses. I'd hate for you to miss out. Head to www.the-entourage.com/increase-sales to get lifetime access for just $19. Now let's get back into the show.
Well, the great irony is that actually building your own business, or at least establishing your own path, is starting to become the more secure route. So I studied the first Bachelor of Entrepreneurship in Australia, early 2000s, when people were like, what, you can study entrepreneurship? But before that, it's like the path was go to school, get good grades, go to uni, get a career, and then stay in, one or as few companies as possible all the way up the ladder. And obviously that journey doesn't exist anymore. And particularly if you think about the last couple of years, with so much change, pandemics coming through, people were getting made redundant, having to change the way they work. Funnily enough, a slightly more secure pathway is to be the master of your own destiny. And why not start that at, 17, 18, right after school, cut your teeth, learn how to do it, and then you can, build your own business or businesses and look after yourself.
And to jump in there, I think that it's good that there's been certainly a bit of a shift in terms of the information that is being given out. I think a lot of people look at me right now, for example, running a startup, looks very glamorous, doing all this fun stuff, going somewhere happy, like awesome, great. And that's one side of things. The other side of things is it's hard. Like, it is not easy. And I think that the more people can talk about that, and the more people that can just you want to go out and you want to raise money for a business, there is a crap ton of expectation on you to make this work, because and I 100% agree. People will invest in people because they want to see them succeed, and they know that they'll succeed, whether it's in this venture or the next one, or the next one, the next one. That's great. But there is certainly, and you'd agree, there is a level of high pressure that we've given you money, you need to make it work. You need to build it into a business, and we want to see a return. And for a lot of 17, 18-year-olds, that's never something that they've experienced before. Like, it's all just been sunshine and roses. So I've certainly been put in a better position knowing that I've actually run my own business before, and the expectation was just coming from me internally. Now it's coming from other people. And hence why I think that it's important for people who want to go out and especially startup. Like, startups are hard. It's understanding that there is going to be so much that you need to learn, and knowing that you don't know anything. Like, literally, you don't know anything. You might think that you might know something about something, but actually you know nothing about nothing. So I think it's important that you can go out there, open mind, willing to learn, willing to accept criticism, know that you're probably going to fail about 150 times every single day, to maybe just have one success a day. If you're lucky, then the expectation and the chance of other kids succeeding in a business, or 25-year-olds or 30-year-olds or however long, first time doing it, is going to go up.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. For sure, building a business is hard. Movies like The Social Dilemma have a lot to answer for. And that used to be, everyone used to think, when I was doing that course years and years ago, and then when Facebook was getting really big and that whole tech entrepreneurship scene started, everyone thought it was have an idea, code all night, raise tons of money, global domination. That's the journey.
God, I wish. God, that'd be easy. I mean, we'd all be billionaires.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not how it works at all. And because I think what makes it challenging is that at every stage of the business's growth, you have to start solving new problems that you don't know about yet. As you say, you know that you know nothing. Like, at first, you're trying to just solve that product to market fit. Is there something that people will pay for? Great. Once you got that going, it's like, okay, now we're going to solve customer acquisition at scale. We don't need 5 customers a week. We need 50 customers a week. That's a new challenge to solve, marketing and sales. And then you're going to have a whole team that needs to start delivering on that. You're growing in headcount. And as you go to from 1 to 7, that's a huge change. As you go from 7 to 10, huge change. Or 7 to 20, 7 to 50. You got to learn how to keep on building this engine. And every time you level up, there's a new problem to solve. And so I think it's great that people understand that it's a challenging journey, because at least they're going eyes wide open. The good thing is there's a lot more assistance and resources and things that you can tap into these days than there ever used to be. Like,
definitely.
The one textbook that we had back in the day was called New Venture Creation. It was a textbook on writing a business plan. That's all that existed. There was no training, there was no coaching, there was nothing like the Entourage, nothing like you. I've heard you talk a lot about self-education and learning out there. None of that existed, but now it does. And so as long as you understand it's going to be a journey that you really need to push at for a long time, but then you're willing to go and find the resources that you need, then you're going to be well equipped.
100%. No, I totally agree.
What have been some of the things that have helped you along the most, be it mentors or resources or support?
Gosh, I like to when you say mentors, it's interesting because one thing that I think certainly helped is almost looking at every single person I talk to on a day-to-day basis as someone whom I can learn from. A lot of people like to put this mentor box around certain individuals who they think have achieved a lot, and they might have. And they're the only people they're actually going to learn from, and they shut off everyone else around them because, well, you're not X individual, so therefore I don't want to hear a single thing that you have to say. Or you might talk to me for 30 minutes, but I'm not going to remember any of it or actually do anything with it. I think that it's important that if you can go around and you can talk to someone, whether they're the Prime Minister of Australia, whether they're the guy who picks up your bins every morning or cleans the floor outside your office, and actually have a genuine conversation and a chat with them. And people have been through a lot. You have absolutely no idea what people have been through as an individual, and experiences and stories and learnings and journeys that people have been on. Sometimes for someone who might not have achieved something financially significant might be a hell of a lot more interesting, and you might have a lot more takeaways than someone who has. And I think that as soon as you start to open your eyes to that and understand that that is one of the greatest things that for me personally, I've ever done, for a lot of people, it's a pretty incredible transformation. With that said, it's important as well to be able to have a pretty good filter. So understand that not everyone knows everything, which means that there are going to be things that people say, and most of the stuff that people say, you're going to have to think about and go, well, is this something that aligns with my values? Is this something that aligns with, the kind of information that I think is relevant for me right now? And then take that on board and then do with it what you must. So yeah, I think for me, that's been one of the biggest things. Treat everyone as a mentor. In terms of online education and all the other stuff, I did do a bit of it. I think it has its place, certainly, for people who are specifically out to learn a topic. So I want to get better at marketing, go to a course on marketing. But for people who just generally want to get better at something that they're doing, I think one of the greatest things you can do is just go and do it. Like a lot of people will, go and do a business degree because I want to start a business right now. Well, the best way to actually learn how to start a business is to genuinely throw yourself in the deep end. Don't be dumb. But at the same time too, just do it. And I think by doing it, you're going to learn a hell of a lot more than sitting there learning it in theory, as opposed to going out there and just giving a shot and learning on the way. Because it's a lot scarier, it's a lot harder, but it'll get you a lot further, a lot quicker.
No, I agree 100%. Particularly in the sphere of business, you got to be applying for anything. You got to be applying what you're learning, no matter whether you're learning from mentors or a course. But you got to be putting into practice and understanding how does this really work in the real world in my business context, because every business market's different, every business sells differently, everything's different for every business. So I agree with the application. So Disputify, what's on the horizon? What's coming up next?
Interesting. For us, the biggest focus at the moment is custom sales growth. So literally, how can we get as many SME merchants on one of the center platforms as humanly possible paying for the product? I mean, we start at $29 a month. For a lot of merchants, they sit there and raise an eyebrow and go, yeah, hang on a second, wait, if you save us even if we pay you up front for an annual subscription, which for us we give 2 months free, so $290. If you save us 2 transactions a year, you're paying for yourself. Yeah, that's right. So we've deliberately priced it as cheap as humanly possible. Half because, we want to make it a no-brainer for merchants, but second of all is we want to get as many customers on as quickly as possible. So for us, that's SME growth, but also do enterprise growth for us has been really cool. We're seeing a lot of traction, a lot of headway there with a couple of key players, which is great. So hopefully we can talk about that in the near future. But it's one of those things that's like, how do you go about a proper sales process? What does the sales process look like? What merchants are you talking to? What verticals are the best? There are just so many questions over the top of it that we've had to have the answer to. And for us, it's just been figuring that out. But realistically, it's now just full steam ahead, get as many merchants on board as possible. Happy days.
Yeah, you're definitely you're focused on the right thing at your growth stage. Like, how do we figure out a proper scalable sales process? Because that's what will take you from, double your headcount, triple your headcount, and then you'll have to start worrying about some other stuff. But this is definitely the focus area right now. All right, Jack, I've got a couple of more questions here that neither of us have seen. It's Make It Happen in a minute. You ready to get into these?
Yeah, go.
Awesome. All right. Oh, great. This ties into something we were talking about before. Who's been your favorite mentor to learn about business from?
Um, weirdly enough, probably Mark Boris. So I met Mark about 2 years ago. I spoke at his mentor intensive program. I've always heard about Mark before. One of the most exciting LinkedIn connections I'd ever made at like 16 was Mark Boris when he accepted it. And I threw my hands up there, ran down and told mum and dad about it. And they just went, great, okay. It seemed to be the most excited person ever. And Mark, so I listen to his podcast all the time, is a great mentor of mine and a really, really, really cool top bloke.
Awesome. Yeah, we've definitely had a lot to do with Mark over the years here at the Entourage. Number 2, what's been the biggest lesson you learned since starting your e-commerce business?
Facebook ads aren't as easy as they actually seem to be. So they take a lot longer to learn. There's a lot of nuances, lots of ins and outs. So I think take your time. Know that's probably going to take years to become a master. And don't expect results overnight.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And even though I said before that Facebook advertising is getting a lot more expensive, it is still one of our primary channels. Like it does still have a very good ROI, but we've got a whole team that looks after it. So we've learned how to do it properly over a number of years. But once you crack it, barely anything will actually beat the ROI at the moment. But we are diversifying onto as many other platforms as we can. Facebook's strong though.
Definitely.
Number 3, what's the biggest opportunity facing Gen Z entrepreneurs?
Opportunity. Well, I mean, the easiest answer I could probably give, which is cliche, I know, it's probably the internet. I've given that answer a bunch of times, not to that question, but I think that there are a lot of opportunities out there that weren't there 15 years ago. The idea that, someone who can join LinkedIn at 16 can go and network with, the CEO of Microsoft, for example, bit of an extreme example, but just the opportunities that are out there for people to, make a name for themselves in the world, and make a name for their product that were never there before. I mean, what you meant to do, go advertise at your local market, but now you can do it on Facebook. It's pretty cool. So I think it's very transformational, and especially when, we've all grown up with Facebook, especially Gen Z. So there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, awesome. All right, question number 4, simple one, 2 options, TikTok or Instagram?
Instagram is what I typically would say. TikTok's algorithm is very scary. I've had it for about 6 months now, and somehow I can spend an hour or 2 on it at any one time, and I've never done that before with any app. So it's pretty scary. I think for anyone who's trying to grow a business, I cannot believe the amount of businesses I've seen who have 0 followers and then in a space of 3 months have like 200,000 followers are getting a crap ton of views on all their videos. Like I've never seen that before. So I think TikTok's a lot of opportunity. And yeah, I think the algorithm's probably a bit too good. So probably spend a bit less time on it.
Gotcha. I mean, that is the game of market, isn't it? Seeing what new platforms or channels are opening up and where you can start actually getting a better return for your effort and your energy, and then you do double down on that if it makes sense, right? Like you've got to be a business that might suit something like TikTok or even Instagram.
Yeah,
as opposed
you can
to
be on both. Like I don't think there's any harm on being on both. It's just about picking what's smartest for you and just having the other one as a backup, but putting your energy into the one that's actually going to work.
Yeah, awesome. Final question. If someone doesn't have the right support network or systems to help them start and build a business, what's the one thing they need to do to make it happen?
Apart from go out there and actually find it, I would say become really practical with what you actually need. I think a lot of people will happily network with 1,000 people, but get about 0 out of it because meeting someone, talking to them for 2 minutes and then moving on, you don't really learn that much. Like a 2-hour conversation you do, 5 minutes you don't. So I think write down, figure out exactly who you need, like what roles in your business do you think you're going to need? Not so much employees, but I want a mentor for finance. Like I want to know someone who's really good at finance and managing money because I want to get better at that. Well, write that down, then write the list of people that you think are possibly it. Go do some research if you don't know. You just go contact those people. Be as humble as you possibly can. Don't try and make yourself out to be more than you are. Just say, hey, I want to start a business for the first time. I'd love to learn more about finance. You're the expert in finance that I've come across. I'd love to take you out for a coffee and to pick your brains for half an hour around different strategies and techniques or just the general fundamental basics. I think you do that, happy days.
Yeah. No, good advice, and obviously something you've done really, really well. All right, that's everything that we were going to cover today. I think the main takeaway that I got from here is in a few short years, you're making some really good progress. You're learning You've learned solid business strategies already, which is awesome. And I love that you're getting into an area that's a big, juicy problem. Like it's really good. I mean, I think, your earlier businesses were obviously, cutting your teeth in the early stages, then some good success in the products and drop shipping, which is a great area to be in. But now I think you're really shaking up an area that's like big and meaningful, and to be doing it at such a young age is awesome. So well done.
No, mate, thank you. I appreciate it. And I think for anyone who's listening, once again, it's all well and good to glorify the 18, now 19-year-old for it all. But I think the biggest thing out of it is just to know that, yes, I've done a lot, but at the same time too, there is no better time to start than now. And I don't mean is that some sort of cringy inspirational quote. It genuinely is a purposeful thing where if you go out, you give something a shot, you stick at it. It takes longer than it actually think it will. Stick at it and be smart, and you'll get somewhere.
Awesome. Jack Bloomfield, thanks for being on.
Hey, mate, thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Make It Happen show. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And it doesn't need to end there. We've actually gone and grabbed a whole bunch of extra resources for you. Behind the scenes footage, videos from this and all the other episodes, as well as show notes that you can grab for free. Just head along to www.the-entourage.com/podcast and you can grab all those extra resources. Thanks for tuning in, and I cannot wait to introduce you to our next guest on the next episode.